Welcome to the Boise State MBA program in Project Management as we focus on risk management. This is a special series as we emphasize risk management. We will use the framework of PMI to walk through the various steps of the risk process. We will look at industry trends, we'll have current examples, and we will make you, hopefully, a much stronger MBA and be able to use the skills of this class. Again, in this case, this is our introduction to project risk management. As we begin our journey, we're going to talk about the background, some key concepts, and an important aspect of stakeholder management. How the stakeholders on your project or your program or your marketing campaign are the ones that really drive your risk profile and how you address risk and issues. So let's begin the journey and head down the road. First, a little background. Over the last 3 years, PMI has emphasized the areas of risk as part of PMBOK 5. Another key program is a program certification and a new certification in risk project management. This is where you have to show that you have over 3,000 hours of risk management. You've taken formal training and you're lucky enough to take a test and you get through it, all after you complete an application process. So there's a lot of changes and a lot of emphasis in the industry on quality risk management. So what are the key points? Let's start with basically all programs and projects have risk, whether it's in manufacturing, HR, marketing, profit or non-profit, they all have risk. They all are trying to meet an objective, there are budget, there are schedules, team members are critical, and they're all controlled by the stakeholders. So no matter where you go and what field you enter, the knowledge you gain from understanding project risk management will be a valuable tool in your MBA toolbox. Key point 2, all projects have negative risk. All those things you hear about that will slow the project down, stop the project, they're there. But at the same time, all projects have opportunities. And those are the things we also want to look at. How we find the opportunities to make our project stronger, our program stronger, our company stronger. And we need to look for those also as we go through this whole analysis. As a general rule, we found that people don't like to invest in risk management. They'd rather say, we'll figure it out, we'll retarget, we'll just get it done, just start doing it. We'll manage it. What we will tell you is that we need to take time to plan, react, and then adjust our schedule to make the best possible outcome for the project and the team. This to me is the key chart as we look at risk introduction. We always talk about risk, issue, and problem. And we tend to use those kind of interchangeably at times. And I think it's really important because as we look not just in project management, but all areas, we understand these terms. And we look first at risk, where we have a probability. And that probability is greater than 0, but less than 1. So there's some probability. And the consequences are greater than 0. Something could happen. And we need to understand that. And the time frames the future. So when we talk about risk, or we add to the risk register, those are items that have a probability, that have a consequence greater than 0, are in the future. We also talk about issues. Well, an issue is something that is going to happen. The probability is there is a consequence, but it's in the future. An example could be, as we start our project, we know in 3 months, the critical person we have on the team is leaving, going to a new position. The project lasts for 6 months. We don't have a problem today, but we do in the future, and that's why it's an issue. Which brings us down to a problem. A problem is real. It's 100%. It's probably happening right now. The consequences, you probably know it. It's greater than 0. And the time frame is right now. The classic example to talk about a problem, years ago there was a movie called Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks. It was based on the actual flight of Apollo 13 to the moon. And on that flight, they had a failure of a critical system. I believe it was the oxygen system. And Tom Hanks echoed the words of the astronaut when he called back to Houston Control and said, Houston, we have a problem. If you're on your way to the moon and you've lost your ability to produce oxygen, you really have a problem. So let's make sure we really have a clear understanding of the 3 big areas of risk, issue, and problem. If you have a problem as a manager, your job is to go fix it. Your job, if you have a risk or an issue, is to schedule it and make sure you have a time to analyze it. That's why we have both a risk and an issue log in our project management profile. As we look at opportunities, it's not always so clear of what's going on. We know there's some probability, there could be a consequence, and the time frame is unclear. So I wish we had a stronger framework for those opportunities, but we'll explore those in more detail. But this is a very key point in our review and a very key part of our process. As you look at risk, you need to balance your plan. Too often we either look way in the past or we look way in the future, or some people look just in the present. So we produced this little slide to emphasize the point. As you develop your plan, do not get locked into one view of the world only. Make sure you look to the future and what you see what the present conditions are, and very definitely review the past. Some key points in risk management success. There's a value to this activity. It takes commitment, takes very strong communications, really needs an organizational support. An important part of it is also scale the effort. If we show you large, complicated risk registers and worksheets and very expensive tools, and you're working on a very small or focused project, don't use them. So again, scale the effort. We're trying to teach you a variety of tools and go from there. And as part of our project management area. So risk management takes a lot of commitment and a lot of planning on the team to be successful. People will say, boy, what are some things that drive risk in my project? Well, uniqueness. If you're doing something new, boy, that's something. Complexity. We always have people start when they do a mini charter called assumptions and constraints. What are your assumptions? What are your constraints? Everybody assumes it's going to go perfectly, that the minimum constraints doesn't always happen. Who are the people on your team? Who are the people you work with? Who are those stakeholders? What do they have to say about this whole process? They will drive a great deal of activity. And as we've seen in other examples, change happens. So that does induce risk. So it's important for us to look at this whole arrow or whole direction of risk as we look at things that induce risk into your project. Another key concept is the kind of risk we're studying here. We're studying project risk. Again, that project could be in operations, it could be a marketing project, it could be an R&D project, all related to some sort of project risk. There's business risk. And business risk, as you hear about, well, we need to have insurance. We need to make sure we have plans for the future. Well, those are business risks that are in a whole different area, and I encourage you to look at those also. We also have personal risk. Some people like to go skydiving. Some people like to ride motorcycles on the weekend. Some people like to just stay home. But everybody has their own level of personal risk. But that's not something we're covering in this class. Again, our focus is on project risk. We'll spend a good deal of time throughout this series of classes talking about residual risk and secondary risk. Residual risk is that risk, no matter how hard you plan or how hard you invest, there's always going to be something in the project that there is a risk. It's one of those things that's why you go to work every day, to see what's going on and basically look at what is happening going from there. The other one I find is that people need to understand is called secondary risk. If you address an area of your project and say you make an investment in some area and take funds or people from another area, that's called a secondary risk. You may have fixed one problem, but you may have induced a new problem. So all projects have these two demons, you might say, of residual risk and secondary risk. All of us fit a risk profile of some kind. It varies by person, it varies by activity, it varies by business, and varies about time in your life. There are people who are risk avoiders. They do not want to take any risk at all. They want the least possible risk at all with their money, their time, their activities, their health. There are people who are neutral to risk, who are kind of in the middle, who will see how it's going and what's going on. And there are risk seekers. A lot of your new business startups, people who will say, I'm going to go out and mortgage my house. I'm going to do everything I have to make this business a success. Those are the risk seekers. Every company has different profiles of risk. Every stakeholder is different, and the stakeholders may have different risk profiles or activities as we look at different areas. How do you find this out? The big area is to talk to people and listen to them and try to understand their risk profile. A big area, but something that will make you a much stronger manager, both from a project point of view and a people manager. These are some notes that I picked up from a blog called the Active Risk Blog. And they pick out some key points just to give you some background on risk. And projects is not just on cost and schedules. There's a difference between riskiness of a project and the sum of all risk on the project. Something to think about. Risk and opportunities are two sides of the same coin. We've talked about that earlier. And risk management should be about improving business performance, not compliance driven. So risk management and risk auditing and risk project management focus is to help the project and business do better. It's not a government or I'll say OSHA type regulation of thou must, but it's there to help you look at tools to make you and the business successful. Other key points from the same blog, risk management needs to be simple. It needs to be something that works for you. It needs to be a win-win. We should see that in all of our business activity. Even though we induce a lot of spreadsheets and templates in our process, the spreadsheets are not the solution. It's the management process. So again, look beyond what we're doing just to capture the data and look at the whole process. And there needs to be renewed debate about the relationship between public and private sector that create the right environment for successful major infrastructure projects. That's a key thing to look at as you look at the blog. And again, not quite the scope of this, but an interesting point is people who deal in risk talk about a lot. And our next slide from the blog, it talks about effective risk management. Helps you make informed decisions on which projects to undertake, which improves delivery, budgets, and margins. And that's why you're in the MBA program, so you can deliver on the projects you have, on the budgets you have, and increase the margins for your company. So the understanding of risk is really critical. Risk management is not just a quarterly process or once at the start of the project. It's an everyday activity. In class, we'll be reviewing a very interesting case study about the Titanic. And we'll look at where risk reassessment might have helped make a better day for the Titanic. One little thing, if we look at personal risk, what's your greatest personal risk you've ever taken? How did it come out? Would you do it again? Are you a risk taker? Just something to think about as we look at this whole process. Again, we're not looking at your risk profile. We're looking at the profile of the project and the key stakeholders on the project. But again, each of us have our own tolerance to risk. So make sure you understand where you are in this whole process. As we look at the stakeholders, we're going to ask your stakeholders, what are your biases? You will get this from watching them, reading, looking at with what they do, from their work they do, their comments. You'll help you understand what the biases are. Let's take a look at some of a big collection of biases. This is from a book by Robbins called Decide and Conquer. It's noted on the bottom of the slide. If you ever get a chance to get this book, I really recommend it. It's a great read on understanding people in business. And you look at all these terms up there, all these are in the world of your stakeholders. All of them, we have the same activity. All of us have emotions. All of us tend to procrastinate. We can't have a little overconfidence. Basically, understanding of some cost is critical. I'm kind of jumping around a bit. We tend to look at hindsight. We all have a fear of failure. We like to, as we talk about KISS, keep it simple, but do we sometimes keep it too simple and miss the key points? And then enculturation. What is your background? What's the background of the culture? All these biases help drive or frame how people look at risk, how they'll look at risk on your project, and how you as the project and business manager should learn to understand these and help the team move forward. Another interesting slide, it's noted on the bottom down there from a blog, talks about risk quotients for a company. And basically there's 5 key areas. Are you agile enough to respond to issues? How's your inconsistency? Are you so structured you can't move? A big one is, do you have the talent in the company? It's a good question to ask as you look at your team. What do you know about your competitor? What do they know about you? And how do you deal with innovation? Are you looking at 2-year-old technology or 2-year-old processes, or are you looking ahead? And from a corporate or program view, it's beyond the basics. This is more of a slide just to have you think about areas that risk and areas for the risk in the company to look at. Have you ever overlooked a risk? We all have. And it's good sometimes to reflect back and say, boy, I wish I had, but do not dwell on that. Learn from the past and go from there. Let me show you some risks people look at in the past. This is from a 2012 conference, Voices on Project Management. And these are things that people actually talk about that they were on their project and really forgot to take a good look at. Weather. Boy, if you're building something or you're traveling or looking at something, weather could be an issue. Video conferencing. We all assume the technology is there for everything. Lack of project experience. Everyone thinks they can do it, but do you really have the experience? And vacations and holidays. We think that everybody's going to work for 300 days straight, where people do take vacation and holidays. That happens, and you have to understand that and plan for it. The last one I thought was very unique, termites. And the little story behind that from the report was that they were building in, I guess, Arizona. They had buildings outside in the desert, and one of the problems you have in the desert on wooden buildings, if you don't treat them, is termites. Well, no one wanted to pay for the treatment of the wooden buildings, and the termites won. So these are just examples of some, and maybe some extreme things to look at, but helping you look at risk in a whole new light. I like this phrase from Michelangelo. Too often we don't aim high enough and we miss it. And we aim too low and we reach it and we think we're successful. So when we look at risk, let's make sure we are balanced in our view and that we are setting the right targets. A very hard thing to do, but sometimes you want to stretch to make sure you're doing the right thing. Again, this is what we're trying to teach you in the class, the tools to make this happen. So as you manage your risk, it's the road to success. So this again was our introduction. There will be more modules, part of our program, and welcome to the Risk Management Program.